It's finally fall, we've had our first chilly day, which means it's time to make some gumbo. Gumbo is a classic Cajun and Creole dish that's surrounded by a lot of tradition. Similar to how an Italian would feel about their red sauce, every gumbo recipe is special and everyone thinks theirs is the best. I am partial to a Cajun gumbo, which means no tomato, and the land and sea are kept totally separate. However, I think gumbo can be really flexible if you're willing to break tradition and step outside of the box a little bit. I've got a classic Cajun recipe everybody should love and everyone should be happy with, and 4 variations that include some secret ingredients I don't think the purists are going to be too happy about. Let's make it.
Gumbo is made with a base of vegetables called the Trinity, that being onion, bell pepper, and celery. It's very similar to a mirepoix in French cooking or a sofrito, and many long-cooked dishes use this to build a foundation of flavor. I like a combination of green and red bell pepper for this. It may not be traditional, but when have I ever cared about that? We need all of this cut into around a medium dice. Megan Kay said I cut these too big, but I like to have visible veggie chunks in it. I like a whole yellow onion in this, so I'll dice that in as well. Celery isn't my favorite vegetable of all time, so I put a little bit less celery than normal, I think. Cut that into a dice as well by cutting the stalks lengthwise and then across. Garlic is another requirement for a flavorful gumbo, so mince anywhere between 5 to 8 cloves. That's it for our vegetables, and we can take a look at some proteins. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to be sticking to a strictly land animal gumbo, so chicken and sausage it is. I've made this recently with kielbasa, and there was almost no discernible difference, so use whatever you can get at the store. Boneless, skinless chicken thighs work really well for this because it won't dry out in a long cook time. This is about 12 ounces of andouille that I'll cut into coins. We won't do anything with the chicken now because we're going to let the roux simmer for about an hour. If we put the chicken in too early, it's going to break down into a mess of chicken strands. Not bad per se, but not the best for this. For our seasoning, we need Cajun seasoning, garlic powder, bay, herbs de Provence, and cayenne. Roux is a required flavoring and thickening component for gumbo, and it's made by cooking equal parts flour and oil together until extremely dark. At the stove, we'll get a Dutch oven over medium heat and add half a cup of vegetable oil and half a cup of all-purpose flour. To achieve the desired flavor and texture of a great gumbo, we need to get this to a dark roux, which is around the color of chocolate. This can take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, and most of the time is active stirring, so be prepared to strap in. For the hardware, a whisk, a wooden spoon, and an oven mitt are super helpful. A whisk helps get into the corners and consistently mix. We'll switch to a spoon when we add our vegetables, and the mitt is going to keep your hand from burning if you need to hold onto the pan like I do. It's really helpful to keep an eye on the temperature as you go, but not much is going to happen in the first 10 minutes. It's not going to change much, and the color's kind of going to stay consistent. Keep stirring constantly because if this burns, you've got to completely start over. Also, be super careful. This mixture gets insanely hot, so don't let any of this get on your skin. It's going to start changing color slowly, and then it's going to darken a bit, and it stalls at kind of the light chocolate stage. It's best to get this as dark as possible without burning. I still have a hard time with that, and it's honestly better to slightly undercook it rather than burning the whole batch. This is where I stopped, but it could have gone a little bit further. Add your larger vegetables to the pan and let those cook for a few minutes. Hold back the garlic as that could burn in the high heat of the roux. Once those have softened, add your garlic and cook for a minute. From here, slowly add 1 quart of chicken stock and make sure to spill a bunch on your counter. We add this in stages because it's much easier to mix in smoothly that way. We need to bring this up to a simmer for the first stage of cooking, but we can season this pot now with everything but salt. Add a bunch of pepper, 2 bay leaves, a little garlic powder, a few good shakes of Cajun or Creole seasoning, herbs de Provence, and a pinch of cayenne. Our Creole seasoning and stock have enough salt to get us in the ballpark to start with, so we won't touch the salt now. You'll notice the meats aren't going in yet. We need to cook this roux for about an hour before tossing in the chicken and sausage. Turn the heat down to a bare simmer and let this cook for an hour covered, stirring every 15 minutes. Okay, so the first hour is done, and your house should smell amazing. This hour is key in my mind as it makes this a much richer dish. At this point, I like to brown both my sausage and chicken in a separate pan. Cook the sausage first so we can get some of that nice fat for the chicken. Take your sausage out with a slotted spoon and place it directly into the gumbo pot. Add your chicken to the pan over medium heat and let this get some nice color. No need to cook it entirely, so it can go into the gumbo whenever it's browned. This sausage was particularly fatty, so I removed most of the fat before deglazing the pan with a bit of water and adding that to the pot. This now goes back to a simmer until the chicken is fully cooked and tender, probably around an hour and a half to 2 hours. I simmered this one for an hour and a half. The chicken at that point is tender but not completely dissolving. Taste this for seasoning when your chicken is tender and consider how much time you have before dinner. If it can cook a little bit longer, go for it. It's going to get more delicious. For me, I'm going to stop here. When you're close to serving, you can get some white rice together using your preferred method. While that's happening, I'd like to have a brief word regarding some gumbo variations and how to break tradition. People from Louisiana, you're going to want to skip this section.
So with gumbo as a platform, what you can do is season it with a bunch of different things to get a very different product. I'll start with kind of the most normal, what I think would be the least offensive, over to what I think is kind of a bit more on the wild side, for gumbo at least. Crab boil, shrimp and crab boil. If you've seen my shrimp and grits video, you know how amazing this stuff is. Think of concentrated seasoning, spice, capsaicin all in one. If you were to season your gumbo with hot sauce, this could easily replace that and be kind of the same thing. It's not hot, so to say, but it's a much stronger thing. So you could put in probably like half a tablespoon of this into the pot while it's cooking and end up with a very, very delicious, spiced, sort of a more Cajun-y type feel. Fish sauce is a thing that you will see in a lot of long cooked dishes nowadays. If you were to smell fish sauce, it's a very, very strong fishy flavor. Think of like condensed anchovy tea. So when you cook with this, you're getting all of the flavor and all of the delicious depth from things like long cooked fish. And kind of like a cheat for it. You're getting it in a small package. So again, adding like a tablespoon of this as the whole dish cooks makes for a really, really good, lip-smackingly delicious gumbo. Soy and miso, not common. This is kind of outside of the realm of normal gumbos now. What this does, I don't want to say umami, but it's umami. It's what it is. Your whole mouth is coated in delicious savoriness, and it works insanely well with gumbo. Like honestly, it kind of blew my mind the first time we made this. So add a little bit of miso and a little bit of soy sauce kind of near the end of the gumbo, probably in this stage right now where we're at. I've got rice cooking. This is pretty much ready to go. And it's going to transform the whole thing into a much more savory. It isn't quite as Cajun-y tasting. It tastes like a different dish, but it's sort of amazing. This is my favorite by far. Gochujang. This works similarly to the crab boil in the same idea of replacing what would be hot sauce. It has that fermented tang that you get from gochujang regularly. If you wanted to just replace the hot sauce with gochujang, maybe like a tablespoon of this, a tablespoon and a half, maybe two, depending on how spicy you like it, you're gonna get a much redder gumbo, a much more spicy and a much more flavorful fermented type of taste. It's gonna be different than your standard gumbo. All of these are different than your standard gumbo. That's kind of the point. These don't have to exist in the gumbo that you make. But I want you to know that maybe they should. If you want something a little bit more savory and funky, maybe go for the fish sauce. If you want it to taste like gumbo, but with a peppery kind of, hey, what is that flavor kick? Maybe go for the crab boil. If you want it to taste unctuous and lip-smackingly delicious, maybe go for the soy and miso. And if you want it to be spicy and similarly umami-y, go for the gochujang. It's all gonna be good. You can make it standard if you'd like. I just want you to know that these are delicious options. I'm sticking with standard tonight, but maybe stick around for my next video and see what I do with these bad boys.
Okay, our rice is done and we're ready to plate this up. Rice on top or bottom is a pretty heated debate. I tend to prefer topping my gumbo with rice. It makes it feel less like a soup to me. Is gumbo a soup? Is it a stew? I don't really know. Maybe its own thing. It's delicious either way. It's rich and it's fatty, so the whole bowl feels crazy comforting. I've always loved topping my bowl with a little bit of Louisiana hot sauce. It brings a nice little spice and vinegariness that I think brings this whole thing together. Overall, this is one of the best things you can eat this fall, and you should make this the first cold day you get. Thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for more comforting recipes for the fall, check out my shrimp and grits video. Consider supporting me on Patreon like these amazing people do. Cheers!